Hello, my name is Zachary Brooks from UGenome. We make genomic medicine personal and accessible for everyone. So today we have Emily Effner, who's going to talk about the future of the genetic testing market. So Emily, take it away.
Hi, Zach. Nice to meet everyone. I'm Emily Effner. I just started at UGenome as a longevity and genomics manager. And when I'm not doing that, I'm working in a lab with stem cells, um, with a stem cell startup. So let's see. The future of genetic testing market. I'm essentially an early adopter of the DTC, which is direct to consumer genetic testing services. And I deeply appreciate several real quality of life improvements I've been able to make given knowledge from this technology. Today, from this talk, I will be giving an overview of this market. We'll learn from the exciting business journey of 23andMe, and we'll examine the DTC market in terms of what are our challenges, what is our audience, and what can we be most excited about. And so, next slide. So, what is the most recognizable name in the genetic testing industry? I think if I could have the crowd say it out loud, it's for the general US consumer, it's 23andMe with a close runner-up, Ancestry, but it Ancestry has a different service or focus category, which we'll get to shortly. Uh, on the left side of the screen, we have a short timeline. Um, Now we're going to focus on 23andMe since the business has been a trailblazer in the industry, with many ups and downs that have made headlines everywhere for years. So the company was founded 20 years ago, and in 2008, Google invested early in 23andMe, and Time Magazine called 23andMe the invention of the year. They were able to raise tens of millions of dollars. I signed up in about 2012. So in 2013, if many of you are familiar with it, a warning letter was received by the FDA, which ordered 23andMe to immediately stop marketing its saliva collection kit and personal genome service as health related tests and all health related tests until they obtained FDA authorization. So, for the first time, the FDA crafted regulations for this industry, and they set up special controls for DTC services in terms of accuracy, user comprehension, and labeling, which 23andMe was able to meet successfully with a lot of work in a short amount of time. Next, important note for 23andMe, before we continue on to the next slide, is noting that they had a partnership with GSK in 2018. Now, what is GSK? It is GlaxoSmithKline, which is it's one of the two major big pharma companies from the United Kingdom. GSK ultimately invested 300 million to gain access to their large genetic database, somewhere around 15 million users. And they could use that anonymized customer DNA to help identify potential new drug targets. Now, however, that is a hard pivot for 23andMe. They went from DTC kits to this full-blown therapeutics, and that is a domain of deep drug development expertise, long timelines, and funding. In the long term and in the background, 23andMe wasn't producing revenue fast enough. So when they went public at the top of the hype cycle in 2021, they never actually turned a profit again. Next slide. So here is their share value. Um, when they went public, they were each share was $266. And interest started cooling as the competition dramatically increased in this industry. The valuation and like bargaining power of 23andMe really started to collapse. Um, and then in October of 2023, a cyber incident exposed genetic and personal data for almost 7 million 23andMe users. Many of you may have seen it in the news. Um, the hackers were mostly targeting Chinese and Jewish ancestry profiles. So from that incident, there were many class action litigation suits. One settlement alone was around $30 million. So the breach and a delayed disclosure by 23andMe severely undermined customer trust in this business, and I think, frankly, in the entire market, because your core asset is it's sensitive data. So ultimately, last but not least, in 2025, 23andMe filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Um, but what's interesting is they're still around. They're not gone. You can go to 23andMe right now. Um, now, why? It's because there was a winning bid of $305 million, which came from the TTAM Research Institute, which is a nonprofit that was created by the very CEO of 23andMe. She managed to save the business and secure all that sensitive data um, in 2025. Next slide. So the big takeaways here from giving you this background. Um, First off, there's one thing I left off this slide, which I want to share really quick. Um, 23andMe was essentially the company that um, redrew the boundaries of health. They were the first company out there, the trailblazer, that kind of cut out that um, intermediary of clinicians and doctors and gave you specialized information about your health. It gave people the ability to have real agency over their health. Um, the next big takeaway, which is quite positive as well, is that they allowed for creation of a new regulatory pathway. Receiving that FDA warning letter and successfully meeting the new regulations was essentially like 23andMe taking a bullet for the industry. Next, something that hurt them and is something valuable in this market to know is that you have to design a business in this industry with reoccurring value, whether that's through ongoing insights or clinical add-ons or longitudinal tracking, B2B business, subscriptions. You can't just have a one and done sale. Next up, third, which is positive and negative, is their real asset was their huge biobank of 15 million users. That was a lot of genotypic and phenotypic data, and it has to be done right. Very capital intensive and long timelines, but that was the real value. And lastly, that massive data breach damaged trust in the brand irreversibly. And it's in a category where trust is essentially everything. So, next slide. So, next, I thought this would be really interesting for everyone because we probably now know a lot of the competitors in the space, and they all do something different. Well, a lot of them do. So, I was able to find about 6 categories, 6 major buckets at which we could comprehend all the big players in this space. So I thought this was like a practical way to look at it. Um, we have got Ancestry First direct to consumer, companies like MyHeritage DNA, Ancestry DNA, kind of the typical family tracing services. Then we have companies that do ancestry and health. And That is where 23andMe is, which, by the way, 23andMe is the only FDA authorized genetic testing service in the market. And then we get more precise. Um, we start having health and wellness first, DTC and genotyping. Again, this is through SNP microarrays. Um, you're swimming in data from just SNP microarrays alone. But we start seeing companies like Everlywell DNA offerings. Um, and then you have the deep D2C genomics. D2C genomics would be like Nebula genomics, um, really giving something for those biohackers, for the power users, and people who are interested or need to know what their rare variants are, either to get to the bottom of the problems that they might be experiencing. Next slide. Here's the last two. The last two is precision health platforms. This is where UGenome would be, along with Self-Decode, Genome Link, Promethease, Gene Food. These are companies that are focused on kind of integrated polygenic risk, multiomics. They're using AI-driven health optimization with the labs, with the DNA data. Um, and lastly, because we have to acknowledge that we also have clinical genetic testing services out there. Many of you have heard of LabCorp, Myriad, MyRisk, and Invitae. So next slide. So another really interesting area to focus on is, and really it's unavoidable, is privacy in our data. How do we really wrap our mind around that? What is the core tension? What are the regulatory gaps? So the data, genetic data is very sensitive. It's immutable, so like you can change your password on your computer, but you can't really change your DNA. And it implicates family members who have never even consented. So your core challenge is what you're trying to balance in this industry is you're trying to balance the risk of this data existing. And that once it exists, it's kind of hard to completely get rid of. It can be subpoenaed, it can be sold, privacy can be breached. But we also really need to balance that with kind of empowering the user, the consumer. I'm trying to convince my family and friends all the time that you can make real day-to-day improvements with the knowledge that this data can give you. And like that is priceless, really. Can lengthen your life. It can get to the root of something that has been hurting you for a long time. So I think key framing here is that the privacy tension in genetics isn't just personal, it's familial, societal. Your your data is your own, but how can you make sure that your privacy is respected? So next slide. So this slide, this is interesting. It's a little bit like myths, facts and myths, or it's like here are legitimate concerns, here are the often overstated concerns in this industry. I'm sure you'll be familiar with several of them. You might hear people say things like, the government will clone you. And in reality, when we're doing these SNP microarrays, the SNP genotyping, and we have so much information just from that alone, that is only 0.02% of your DNA. That makes re-identification of you very rare, theoretically possible, but rare. We do have legitimate concerns. So, you know, the hack and many people from different ethnic backgrounds having their DNA data sold on the dark web. Um, We do have some overstated claims in terms of diagnosis. A lot of the information that comes from genetic data is a nudge, and not a diagnosis because it's probabilistic, it's a polygenic, so many genes involved, risk scores that are put together and interpreted and delivered to you. Um, so it is possible for many users to overinterpret their results, which I'm definitely one of those people. Um, and lastly, as we're winding down here, we have completely legitimate concerns. We saw in 2025, 15 million users, genetic data treated as a bankruptcy asset, sellable, not covered by HIPAA. That happened. I'm glad that it's resolved, but what would happen if that happened to another genetic testing service? So, we're really only governed by consumer privacy law, in that category. There's some federal gaps that definitely exist in protecting our data there. So, next slide. So, a lot of people would find this slide very interesting. There's a lot to learn here. Um, what has been really helping us in the genetic testing industry, I think, is this middle tile, the state level legislation. So there are now 13 states as of early 2026 that are requiring genetic testing services to provide express consent for sharing data, your genetic data, with third parties and requiring that you have deletion rights. Arizona and California are among these states. Next up, we have GINA, legislation that came out in 2008, and it essentially protects employment and group health insurance by prohibiting genetic discrimination. So ultimately, in that category, the real gaps are insurance, um, LTC and disability, and corporate bankruptcy scenarios, like we previously mentioned. But it seems as though the states are actively filling these gaps. And lastly, the federal law is where we have some indisputable gaps. There is no preventative measures yet to safeguard genetic data. What we're seeing right now is more reactive than preventative. Um, so, for instance, like the DOG strictly keeps military personnel from doing any D2C testing. There's also no bulk genomic data exchanges allowed to be transferred to China and Russia. So let's see. Um, we also have to consider that rebuilding trust with the users in this market is probably like the next competitive moat between genetic testing service providers. Basically, how can we reclaim the trust of millions of users to take control of their health? So, next slide. Let's see. So, who is our audience? Important question. And some information might surprise you here. So, from many data sets and market research forums, they've found that the largest active user group is age 25 to 34. One market report estimated that about 45% approximately of DTC users were driven by preventative health and wellness interest. Approximately 90% are white. The market is predominantly based in North America, but growing very quickly in the Asia Pacific. And lastly, quite importantly, a significant fraction of the DTC users are people who are feeling really dismissed in regular healthcare. They're reporting a health issue and not getting answers, and they expressly desire to have more agency over their health information. So, and lastly, over here to our right, about 72 to 74% that are very interested um, are of, I should say, 70, let's say approximately 75% of those that are DTC users are very interested in these three categories: ancestry, traits, and disease risk. So, next slide. So, this is our last slide, and it calls out how promising the future of genetic testing is, and how well positioned UGenome ultimately is. So the global DTC genetic testing market appears to be roughly 2 billion in terms of its market size today, with most credible forecasts putting it about 6 to 9 billion by 2030, implying roughly 20 to 24% capital annual growth rate. It's pretty impressive. The longevity industry right now also is booming with 30 to 35 billion dollars today and estimated to roughly double by the mid 2030s. Genetic testing is essential infrastructure for this industry slash lifestyle. And lastly, I want to point out how excited we can be for the future developments in this field. I think it's going to be very exciting to see what partnerships form between major brands and the integration of wearable data. Also very interested in seeing how companies creatively rebuild trust with the public. And lastly, I think testimonials and case studies are what's going to be the most relatable to our audience and be especially powerful. So, thank you and hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Emily, thank you so much. So once again, this is Zach Brooks from UGenome. So you can find links to UGenome in the post that you're going to look at. You can also find some information about Emily if you want to contact her directly. So thank you so much. UGenome, we make genomic medicine personal and accessible for everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.